the hour of grace that we live in. I know from the standpoint of maybe a lot of Jewish people, they wonder why the Gentiles so readily accepted Christ as their Savior, and why the world over, Gentiles, on the average, they choose the first day of the week to assemble to worship the Lord. I stated at the end of that message that it was typed in the law. It's also worded in the 23rd chapter of Leviticus. Now, every once in a while through time, I have gotten some literature from a big Seventh-day Adventist set up here in Ohio trying to prove that if we worship on the first day of the week, we are accepting the mark of the beast, which is Catholicism. And I have to repudiate that. And the last time I preached this message, and we printed it, why the Gentile church choose the first day of the week to assemble to worship the Lord, I have not received nothing from them. I hope I said something other clear enough and plain enough to make it clear that they're the ones that's in error. Now we're using the creative picture. I want to say this morning, God is a God that has loved His creatures, His human family. Through time, there's been things concealed in His Word. We've read it. We just looked over it. Never seen really the depth of what it was talking about. We're dealing with this message today to try to repudiate and put in silence, especially in our minds and our lives, that this thing of Christians saying that the heaven and earth was created in 6 days of 24 hours each, and on the seventh God rested. I have to say this morning, my purpose in this, brothers and sisters, to show you the Bible is very clear and enlightening. If we will just allow the Spirit of God to take the written scriptures and put in our hearts the picture that we see. So my point this morning is, the end of it is to show you, right here in the very creative act of God, the fact that He rested on the seventh, that was not a day of 24 hours at all. He rested, we will say, 1,000 years. When we come to the scriptures in Revelation, where Jesus says, He's the beginning, the creation of God, that don't mean that Jesus had anything to do with creating the heaven and the earth as we read about it in Genesis 1. Not at all. He's the beginning of the new creation, which is redemption. But to understand that, when we get to that point, then we have to understand what has God been doing through the eons of time. So try to follow me this morning, going back into Genesis 1:1. For the first 2,900 years, approximately, there was no written scriptures, written Bible, written record of anything about creation, when it happened, who did it, or what. We only pick the story up when we see Moses, who was brought up in Egypt, and he was brought up and learned in all the ways of the Egyptians. So Moses, as he was picked by God to lead the children of Israel out, Moses, having been raised up in Pharaoh's household, he was an educated man as far as Egyptian, we will say, intellectualism was. It's while in the journey of 40 years of the wilderness, where he's leading the children of Israel, God begins to deal with Moses and speaks to Moses. And the things we're going to read here, brothers and sisters, is not some handed down old wives' fables that's handed down through the years of time to Moses, and he's just recording them. Because God says later on in another scriptures that God was able to speak to Moses from mouth to ear. So God knew exactly what He was doing when He used Moses. So these words we're going to read is written not by an idiot nor an illiterate. They're words written by a man that was highly looked upon as an intellectual man of his hour. So he says here, in the beginning. Now the word beginning here literally means somewheres in the eons back. Scientists today will tell you that all the archaeological things and the testings of rock and the radioactive this and the radioactive that as they test, that the planet itself has been here approximately so many millions of years. Well, I have no quarrel with that. And I don't think if we're sensible Christians that we should either. We should absolutely begin to realize there's things buried in the crust of this earth. They're an unwritten record, but they tell us of a past, and we should begin to and be willing to accept that. There's a lot of denominational Christians today that they separate themselves from the mainstream of, we will say, Christendom, and they will try to tell you that this planet Earth was made in 6 creative days of 24 hours each. Well, I'll have to say, it was not. Then when we say something about the bones of the dinosaurs and the prehistoric animal life, they say, oh, that was all in Eden when Adam was put there. I have to say, only a foolish man would even talk like that. Because those bones of them giant dinosaurs could not have possibly survived the flood and been in Noah's Ark. First off, you couldn't have got many of them in Noah's Ark because some of them animals stood up so tall. They would have stood on the lower floor and stuck their head through the window out the top. So that would have been a kind of a funny looking scene floating on top of water with a few little animals in there. And I have to say, brothers and sisters, there was no dinosaurs. None of those prehistoric creatures at all. That's why their bones lay out there buried in the crust of the earth. Now, if scientists are right by saying that it's proven scientifically and archaeologically that the planet Earth has been here for so many millions of years, I look at that and I say, well and good. But have you ever stopped to think, what happened? What brought about suddenly a change? Why didn't all of those dinosaurs' bones rot and decay as our animal life and ours does? Archaeologists the world over today are uncovering the remains of prehistoric mankind, what they call mankind. They sure wasn't your and mine ancestors. They were just part of that lingering animal kingdom that lingered on. But we'll say this, there must have been a climatic change that brought about suddenly an end to that life system, which then as it did, it absolutely froze up the bacteria and everything that would bring about, we will say, the decaying of bones and the breakdown of all that physical structure. God absolutely wanted a testimony and a record in the crust of the earth to speak itself of a prehistoric past. So we shouldn't have no argument in that. And God don't have to go in all the details to give you all the full picture of everything. If we cannot take a little fragment here and a little fragment there and begin to link it together, I have to say there's something wrong with us. So now then, let's look at these days of creation. So in the beginning, somewhere in the eons of time, God created the heaven and the earth. That's the way God wanted Moses to write it. Period. And that period could have covered many millions of years. We have no quarrel with that. Now verse 2 picks us up at the time that God wants a record of what he began to do with the earth, with the heavens, to begin to change it, to bring it into an era of time related to you and me. So verse 2, words like this, and the earth was without form and void. In other words, this is not the way the planet was in the original beginning. This is the way it is at an ending of a time when chaotic judgment has struck it. There was no life on it. Nothing functioned. Nothing breathed. There was no movement. So for how long the planet stayed like this, that's the condition the planet was in when we come to verse 2. It was void, rendered useless, no life. You could write a check for $1 million, sign it. But if all of a sudden something other comes up and you see it necessary to void it, write it void right across it, well, that check is as worthless as a blank sheet of paper. So it's worthless. So that's what it means, void. The planet was worthless, it's listless, it's lifeless, it has no function. And there's a condition that surrounds this. And darkness was upon the face of the deep. Now the word deep does not mean a hole in the ground. It literally means darkness was upon the face of space. Means that area surrounding the earth, the planet. And I have to say, it doesn't necessarily mean darkness literally engulfed the whole vast universe, because we have to begin to realize, brothers and sisters, all them planetary bodies were still out there. Even though they're not in, we will say, in a relationship to function as we will describe later. But the main interesting point is darkness was upon an area of space around this planet. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now, why didn't he move upon the face of the earth, which is the planet? Well, it so happens we have to realize these waters, which were not in a form like in the Ohio River, there was a giant fog. They were in a vapor, we will say in a vapor state. And they covered this entire atmosphere around this planet Earth. And I don't know how many of you have ever watched. Once in a while there is a movie, maybe it pertains to news or an adventures in the Arctic regions. And sometimes the weather atmosphere is just right, especially in the North Pole. When they fly over, you cannot see nothing. All you see underneath of you just like a giant cloud. But what it is fog. It is true, brothers and sisters. Extreme temperatures of ice and stuff. When it is coming in contact with, we will say, a little warmer temperature, that's what it does. It creates this fog. And it actually can fill the whole atmosphere. You can't even see through it. So the point is this. If darkness was upon the face of the deep, means space around the earth, and the Spirit of God began to move upon the waters, we have to accept the fact he moved upon that which is water, but we will say in a vapor, fogging-like condition. And it wasn't just, we will say, a mile above the earth. It rests plumb out into space, engulfed. The planet was absolutely engulfed in nothing but a darkness of fog. So at this time, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, the surface of them. What's he going to do? He's going to begin to separate something. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. So when the Spirit of God begins to move on the scene, God himself is light. And as he begins to move these waters, wherever he moves, yes, and he begins to separate waters back, light is there because he is the light. Sometimes scientists will say, well, it's cosmic light. Well, what is cosmic light in the first place? What's the origination of it? What stems it? Does it come from a battery? So I have to say, God is that light. And without him, there ain't no other light that can equal to it. So we see here, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. So his presence begins to move to separate this. And God saw the light that it was good. In other words, when his Spirit begins to move on this darkness to separate these waters, he cannot help but see the end results because it looks good to him. There's nobody else there to look at it. So God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And this is not doing anything with a day of 24 hours. Keep in mind, there is no such thing as measuring hours until we come here to the fourth creative day. So there's no way you can Gauge, what time is it? So day and night, we're going to prove to you, brothers and sisters, that's the reason why we got so many circles. These days are relative to approximately 1,000 years of time in that sense. It is said today by modern scientists, and I think children in college and such, they will read how that the last ice age dissipated and disappeared off of the earth roughly 10,000 years ago. Well, if you can follow me in this, you can see then, brothers and sisters, because this number here, this is our cycle. From the beginning of Adam till we come over here, we're at the end of the 6,000, this is the millennium. But if we'll count this and go backwards, the Ice Age began to finally receive its last decomposing and melting. As the light and everything is separated, and finally, brothers and sisters, things begin to be clear so that the earth now could be standing out all alone, so that sunlight could really shine on it, we'll have to realize, not until the sunlight of the planet sun itself could shine on the naked earth's surface, there could not be a blade of grass grow. Never. Don't let them so-called Church of God and that kind tell you that was different. This first creative day, brothers and sisters, it was just as barren could be. So, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So we could say this, the language of this shows God began with something that was in a darkened, negative state. When he begins to change it from the darkened, negative state to a state of lightness, that's why that he calls that day, because now it's understood what it really is. And that's why, brothers and sisters, the Jews today still hold the calendar, even of their weekly days and their day of 24 hours. The day starts with the night period first. Starts at sundown of the previous day, comes to the night season first, that's the beginning of the next day, and then the daylight hours, that ends that particular day. But not the Roman calendar. The Romans, just as pagan as they was, and the whole world still observes, the day starts in the middle of the night. Imagine that. And ends in the middle of the night. What a picture. And here we still go by it. So let's follow on here. So this is the first day, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And we can say this, from the time God begins to move upon the face of those waters until he says, and the evening and the morning were the first day, 1,000 years approximately has passed. There's not one blade of grass to be seen anywhere. There can be seen ice now as glaciers. So now then we continue on. And God said, let there be a firmament. Now in this, he's talking about an area of space above the earth in the midst of the waters. Let there be a firmament or a space above the earth that's clear. You can see through it. Nothing obstructs the vision. Let there be firmament in the midst of the waters. He's still looking at the substance of waters. And let it divide the waters from the waters. Now this is coming to the second day. He takes a specific look at this situation. So he's going to divide waters from waters. And as he does, is he going to create an accident? No. He's going to put certain amount of water into a relationship to the earth the way he wants it to serve the oncoming future. And we hear scientists, they're just crying their hearts out. The greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect. You know, brothers and sisters, I got as much confidence in these scientists today as I have that old foxhound. Ho! He's on a fox trail. They think they're on the trail of something or other, and they couldn't find it if they had to. Now, that's just a little humorous expression. When I read Revelations 21 and 22, that's where we wind up at. Do we see anything like the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean still in existence? Tell me where it went to. What happened to it? Did an accident occur? Well, there's giant ice glaciers still on the south and the north polar regions. But they say they're melting. And I have to say, well, so what? Well, we're going to get too hot here. Well, it's hell. It's going to be that hot. But it ain't going to be that hot on earth. How do we know, brothers and sisters? God ain't allowing, we will say, certain atmospheric changes to take place right now just to start the melting of the glaciers. Then by the time, brothers and sisters, we go out of this era of time here to start the millennium, God's Spirit is still going to be working, and He's going to be starting to pull the masses of water back into space as the final glaciers melt, so that the earth will again appear like it was the day that there was a bang. Now I don't want no scientist to tell me when there was a bang, half of it was a glacier. You're a foolish man. It took tremendous heat to create that bang. So there's no reason for you to say that out of the bang came a planet with giant ice glaciers. That's nonsense. And I have to say, I wonder where the water was at when the bang took place in the first place. How come it got here? I have to believe, brothers and sisters, God's the greatest chemist and the scientist has ever been. Once that bang took place, brothers and sisters, and He blew all them little particles out there that forms the stars and the sun and the moon and such like, it was just as simple for God to make water as it was to make carbon that makes up the basic substance of the earth's crust. And that's why I have to say, brothers and sisters, I go along with certain things from an intellectual standpoint. But when they get so to the point, brothers and sisters, they're ready to stand you on your head, I have to say, I ain't going to stand by on my head for nobody. Not in that respect. So this morning, so He said, let there be a firmament in the midst. So now then we can say, He's taken a strategic look at a certain element of this great giant foggy condition, and He's beginning to pull it out into space, way away above the earth. He pulled it so far out there you couldn't see it because He vaporized it. What was He doing in doing that? He was forming a vapor barrier to the ultraviolet rays of the sun, which would eventually beam down on this planet. When the time came, God wanted the sun to be in that perfect relationship. But until then, He must strategically place these waters in the relationship to the earth where it will function and do God's purpose. So He separates one mass of this vaporized water. He pulls it way out into space. I'm not saying how far, but He took it far enough, brothers and sisters. There was no gravitational pull on it to pull it back down here. Then we see what else. And let it divide the waters from the waters. So this left still waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. So He separates two elements of water. One bunch goes that way, and another bunch is to come this way. And at that time, it was all still in a fog. The glaciers are still covering the earth. And God called the firmament heaven. That's the immediate atmosphere, we will say, for a few miles up around the earth. And the evening and the morning were the second day, and we could say this. How much time, as far as time concerned, how much time has transpired now? Another 1,000 years. Brings us to the end of that 1,000 years. Now I realize in your denominational church world today, they would repudiate, oh, now the Bible doesn't say that. You just wait till we get to the second chapter of Genesis. Then we will see what the Bible did actually say. So now then we go on. That's the second day. Now then, we come in the 9th verse. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. So as these vapors begin, we will say, to dissipate, he's bringing them back down to earth to settle. I have to believe, brothers and sisters, if he's going to separate these waters from that which is land, keep in mind, already vast areas of the earth is covered with glacier. So we're not looking at that glacier suddenly disappears, because it's covering dry land too. But these waters, he's putting them down here, brothers and sisters, and water always settles in the low parts of the earth, right? So as these waters begin to settle to the earth, they did not freeze up. They began, we will say, to form streams and lakes. And that's the beginning of what this third day, which is approximately 1,000 years in length, will begin to bring into manifestation, because this completely clears the atmosphere that's above the earth, so that from the earth itself you can see clearly miles into space, nothing to obstruct your vision. So we see this third day, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. So now we can see then, there's liquid water forming in settling low spots. This becomes, we will say, the beginning of lakes. This becomes the beginning of rivers. Now, I heard a comment said the other day, don't you know our mountains are formed by the glacier period? Well, up to a certain point, I will accept certain things in that light. But I've seen about as many of the mountains inside, from the exterior of it, looking at it from the high altitudes and the low altitudes. Some of them mountains, brothers and sisters, especially in the Rockies and such, there's no way did the glacier era cause them mountains to be like that. Them mountains was heaved up out of the crust of the earth by giant earthquakes that busted the earth's rock crust and pushes them up. Now I can accept the fact that in the Midwest we've got low hills. Yes, I can say, yes, some of these hills is made up of loose rock and gravel and a lot of dirt. Well, I can accept the fact, yes, glaciers did that. But I'll have to say, brothers and sisters, when you're talking about the Rocky Mountains and things of that nature, where you see giant rock bluffs, canyons that are so many thousand feet down, like the Grand Canyon and that. Yes, some of that was caused, brothers and sisters, by masses of water. But that land, brothers and sisters, that was once covered by water would have never been covered by water unless something from underneath would have lifted it up and brought it to an elevation where that water had to escape off of there. So we can say today, brothers and sisters, that our major mountain ranges are the product of giant earthquakes that have erupted through centuries and centuries of time. So I have no problem, brothers and sisters, recognizing how the mountains got here. But the main thing is, brothers and sisters, when God got through separating these waters and condensing them and putting them down here so that the dry land would begin to show itself. Yes, you have small lakes and riverbeds. Still's the giant glacier, still, is, we will say, resting here on this planet, to be eventually melted away as these creative days goes on. So as we watch here, so we're in the third day, and God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas, and God saw that it was good. Now, all within the same period of time, and God said, let the earth bring forth grass. There was not a blade of grass yet. We're in the 3,000 year of time. And he said, let the earth bring forth grass. What's he doing? He's speaking a law. But you're going to see later on, brothers and sisters, there was not one blade of grass a-growing until we begin to come over to this. We're in this third creative day. God has said, let the earth bring forth grass. Now then, God spoke it. God said it. It's His choice. He's the creator, isn't He? And when God said, let the earth bring forth grass, what do you think angels was doing? They're all lined up. Now I'm going to illustrate this just to fit some of this carnal, pathetic, childish minds people have got today. They can't see them, and so therefore, if they can't see it, they just must be around with their arms crossed, doing nothing. I have to say, brothers and sisters, when it comes to making man, if God said, let us make man in our image and likeness, who in the world do you think He's talking about? There's not three persons in the Godhead. Forget it. There's only one God, and He's a invisible God. He don't even exist in a body form. Don't even have a shape. Never has been seen by anybody. Can't be seen. He's invisible. He's a spirit. He fills the universe. Yet He can come down and manifest Himself in a form. For what purpose? To communicate to you and I. But that's not His eternal abode. So that what's He talking about when He said, let us? He's talking to His angelic beings. They are spirit beings also. So I have to say, all this time, these righteous angels are waiting their turn to fit right in, to go do their work. And while He's already come through 2 creative days, I see angelic beings, brothers and sisters, who are given laws over nature, the universe. Why do you read in Revelation? And he saw a mighty angel come forth, and he saw a ball of fire cast into the sea. What do you think that angel was doing? Playing? He had access to the powers of God to be used in the proper relationship that God wanted him to be used. So it's not the angels doing the creating, it's the angels carrying out what God has spoken as a law into existence. And I have to believe, brothers and sisters, when God says, and let the earth bring forth grass, there was angels awaiting their moment to go to work and to begin to do and set in motion laws that's going to watch over this production of grass, plant life, and everything. And keep in mind, brothers and sisters, I find it hard to look through the mist of confusion of scientific evolution to think that everything came from one little cell life, that there's that much intelligence. Well, look at all the different plant lives we have. It had to have an origin in the beginning. There had to be a mastermind behind it to design it. So I have to believe, brothers and sisters, tonight, when we look at creation and everything that creation is involved and within it, we have to look to a God that's a mastermind. He's the greatest scientist, botanist, everything that we can imagine. For the whole universe is His laboratory. And I have to believe, brothers and sisters, angelic beings was made. They're not only ministering spirits, but they're ministering spirits that help watch over the laws of God. I don't see nothing functioning, brothers and sisters, by chance or by accident. I see these angelic beings absolutely going to work, carrying out the functionary purposes that God created them to do. So this third day, the herb yielding seed and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so, and the earth brought forth grass. God seen it already. Now you say, well, right there, Brother Jackson. See, it done says that the earth brought forth grass. You wait till we get to the other end of this verse, this chapter, brothers and sisters, and you'll see. Once God spoke it into existence and spoke it as a law, and the angelic beings go to work, it's a finished work for us, Him concerned. God seen you and I before the foundation of the world too, but you sure wasn't here. How many understands that? All right. But He can see you. You seen how many freckles you got on that little old nose of yours. And the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind, and God saw that it was good. So we're at the closing of the third day. And I can say, all the time, yes, it's slowly warming up. The ice is beginning to get moisture on it. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the third day. Well, we're a long ways from where? We're a long ways, brothers and sisters, before there ever was a man put on it. And he wasn't put on it until right there. So let's continue on. We've come through 3,000 years of time. And God has been pulling this planet out of a chaotic judged state, bringing it back into a relationship where he can use it again. And God said, let there be lights. Well, by the time the third day has come to close, and the waters are all now abated, and they're now flowing in streams, the atmosphere, it's time for the sun and the moon to be spoken into relationship. Now then, because it's important, brothers and sisters, that the sun be brought in proper relationship to the planet. Because it's going to take what this sun can do now in the fourth day, in the fifth day, in the sixth day, even in God's Sabbath, that helps put the earth in a proper, perfect relationship, climate-wise, for him to put his first man. So let's continue on here. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament, in the heavens, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Now, night in this relationship, brothers and sisters, we must understand, is different than the night in that first creative day. Because the sun rising and setting was not even in relationship. If you would have been on the earth then, brothers and sisters, you couldn't have told when the earth made a complete revolution. But we can see here, now that is what he's going to begin to put time, bring these planets in relationship to the earth, so that he's getting things ready for the eventual appearance of man, plant life, animal life, and all other kinds of life that's going to be manifested on the planet. And the sun plays a very important part. That's why, brothers and sisters, scientists today will tell you, you could prove it. You could go out in your front yard. Right now the grass is so green. But you just take a little old thick sack, a sack or a rug, lay it down there and put some weight on it where it can't be moved. See how long it'll stay green. And a week later, it's losing its green color. Because, brothers and sisters, that chlorophyll, it cannot absorb it from the atmosphere, the ultraviolet rays. So it's going to begin to die. That's what will happen. It will die. So much depends on the ultraviolet rays of the sun, how plant life and all other life will be related to this planet. So we're in the fourth day. It's necessary that these two planets, we know this, the moon is not a direct light. It does not give off no ultraviolet rays at all. It's only like a mirror in space. It's just a reflection. Same way with the stars. They don't give off ultraviolet rays. Only the planet's sun does. It's a giant ball of gases and substance. And some scientists are even afraid that the sun will go out of existence in so many millions of years. I'm not. Because the same creature that made that can make it over again. Can't he just keep adding a little more gas? Well, but you see, he's got to have a tank somewhere. No, he don't. Now, don't mind if I try to humorize this along, brothers and sisters, because scientists, I've even heard some of them talk myself. You get some of these highly educated characters out of college, and oh my, they like to rattle. I had one, brothers and sisters, I won't tell you where it was at. He heard me preaching on this one night, and oh my. He came the next evening, and we was having some lunch together. Oh, brother, he cut loose, and I thought, yeah, just go ahead and beat your gums together. I'll listen. But they like to take the whole subject away from you and tell you just exactly how it all happened. But very little do they ever say about God. But I have to say, brothers and sisters, now we're at the fourth day, and God is mentioned that these two planets, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for, notice, for signs, for seasons. Signs and seasons, these are things that functions through the whole year cycle, and for days and years. Now, days and years, brothers and sisters, puts us in the relationship of man, how he looks at time as he exists on earth. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light on the earth, and it was so. And God made two great lights. In other words, he just didn't then make them. They were already there. They had to be there, brothers and sisters, from the prehistoric era. Because the same plant life that existed then had to draw them ultraviolet rays from that sun up there. The only thing is, when God judged that prehistoric era, that's why I've always said, all he had to do is let this planet Earth go into a convulsion of giant earthquakes. It just rocked this planet a few degrees away from the sun. And brother, the temperature dropped overnight. And as it did, in many places, animal life in a matter of hours was dead, froze up. Other places of the planet, which was not exposed to that extreme cold temperature, they existed a little longer. But the point is, brothers and sisters, that relationship away from the sun was enough to start that gradual freezing up, that temperature that we will say warm-blooded animals could not exist in. They might have survived a little while longer, but eventually they died because the temperature just kept dropping. And after a while, brothers and sisters, there was not one thing left alive on this planet. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. And as the temperature just kept dropping, and all the moistures, as it began to vaporize, it begins to form what we'll say the beginning of the glacier eras. I have to say, in the prehistoric world era, there was no ice glaciers on this planet. Was no need for one. This come about by some chaotic, catastrophic judgment stroke that God rendered unto it. And so, brothers, this fourth day, God is now beginning to pull. And it's not a day of 24 hours. And I can see the Spirit of God, brothers and sisters, as he begins to pull this planet right back into a perfect relationship. Now, when he did it perfectly, when he said, let it be for years and days, he brought it right back in perfect relationship to the sun, so that every 24 hours you would have a day, and a perfect circle around that would constitute 360 days to make a solar year. Perfect. And the planet Earth would be in perfect relationship. He would have a perfect climate around this Earth. At that time, this Earth was never destined to have sub-zero in certain places. I have to believe, brothers and sisters, while he brings it back into relationship and puts it in relationship to the solar sun and stuff, the ice glaciers are still melting. Still melting. Keeping on melting. The little lakes are getting larger. The river streams are flowing a little brighter. But as God brings it back in perfect relationship to the sun, he's warming the earth's surface up enough. Because for there to be blades of grass, the soil itself has to have a temperature, brothers and sisters. It will not grow under icebox relationship. No plant life will. So we can say he's still bringing it back, and the sun and the earth and the moon begins to go through their cycles. And by the time the end of that fourth day is done, that's got everything back in perfect relationship. Another 1,000 years has transpired. And we can say, brothers and sisters, the icebergs are melting faster and faster because it's getting warmer and warmer and warmer. So now then, Let's come to this fifth creative day. So we come to verse 20. And God said, let the waters. Now then, there's large bodies of waters beginning to appear. No Pacific Ocean, though. No Atlantic Ocean. Just large lakes and things. Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl. Now this is birds that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. So you've got marine life in the waters, and you've got fowl life that flies in the air. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly. Now, there can be something said here. Your scientists today are saying that certain types of whales are ancient species of the prehistoric past. Well, I will not argue with them, but I will say this. I see it very practical and reasonable that when the earth did go through that deep freeze, what was moving in waters as marine life, it did not all have to die. Years ago when I was a little boy, somebody gave my mother 2 little goldfish. And we lived in the country. And these 2 little goldfish, me and my sister, we liked to just watch them. And at that time, along with these 2 little goldfish, there was a little tadpole given with them. And that little old tadpole, he was just a dark color. He couldn't say black, he couldn't say brown. He's just a dark color. But we watched that tadpole. Now, how many knows what a tadpole is? It looked like a black bean with a tail on it. And we used to like to watch that thing from day to day. And after a while we noticed, as the body part got bigger, we noticed the tail began to get shorter. And as the tail would get shorter, then it wasn't long we could see little things coming out on the sides of this body. And in a short matter of time, brothers and sisters, this thing that was a tadpole, that was one shape, now then his tail's gone, and he got 4 little legs. And here he is swimming around in the water. And then he's up here on the top. And my mother had some of this here green like leaf stuff. And that tadpole would get on top of that. And finally then, why, she put a little stick in here to float. But in the meantime, we're watching the goldfish watching them also. But you know, one day we noticed this little tadpole. He was on top of this little stick. And one morning when we got up, that tadpole was gone. And we never did find him. Because just about 100 yards away from the front of the house was a creek. And you could hear them frogs out there, niddy, 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 all over in the summertime. He heard them mates out there, and he got out. How he got out, don't tell me, brothers and sisters. He jumped out. He jumped onto the floor. It happened all in the night. And we looked and looked and looked everywhere, but we gave it up to a lost cause that the tadpole, nature called him to the creek, and there's where he went. But now let me get back to the goldfish. In the wintertime, Mommy was kind of worried about these goldfish. She wanted to keep the fire warm. But every once in a while, brothers and sisters, it would come a cold night and drop the temperature down there. And them fish froze up in that tank, or that little bowl of water. And Mother was worried about it. And some of the neighbor women told her, said, don't worry about it. Don't try to thaw them out too quick. Just let them thaw out naturally. And you'll find out they'll pull right through. And time again, through a long winter season, them little goldfish could freeze right up in that water. And when that would thaw out gradually, them little old goldfishes goes right back to swimming. Now, if goldfish could do that, then do I question God to the point? If scientists are saying that some of these whale creatures we do have in our oceans today date way back into that ancient period of prehistoric era, are we doing wrong by saying, why, sure, they could freeze up, and when it all finally did thaw out, they just went a-swimming? How many understand my point? So I'm not going to repudiate what they're saying, but I have to say, brothers and sisters, I have to believe that there's a certain element of fish out there that are the type that God wanted for the era of mankind to be here. So let's just leave that as it is. And so when we see this, that he has put marine life, this goes to show you've got fluid, liquid water now floating all over in these streams throughout the earth. Now, let the waters bring forth, and I've done read that. Let it bring forth the winged fowl, but I'll have to say this when we come to the winged fowl. I have seen the skeletons of giant birds. Museum of Natural Science in Washington, D.C., they've got the skeleton. It's the carcass of a giant bird that existed way back there in the prehistoric era of time. They had teeth. They had wingspans. I forget how long they was. And legs. And they could fly and pick up a sheep and carry them and then sit down and eat them. And when I looked at that, I said, yes, it's got teeth. They put it together by wire. Shows that it existed. They found it in a cave structure out, I believe, in Montana or Washington, one of the western states. But I thought as I looked at that, what if we had birds that large today? Our eagle is pretty large. Our vultures are pretty large. But one that big that could pick up a sheep, I'm glad there are none of them around. I have to say, brothers and sisters, everything that's a fowl life or animal life that's on the planet itself today, God made it of a size and of a nature that the man he's going to put here to be a ruling creature over it, he could absolutely adjust himself. Because, brothers, if we still had giant birds flopping through the air like that, you would be afraid for it to turn your little child loose on the outside. Wouldn't you? Well, I know I would. So we have to say, as it is, even the eagle and some of them, the little rabbit, the little quail in them, they still fear for the size they are. But I'm so glad that there's not one big enough to pick a man up or a child up. And that's why I've said many times, all of them animals that some of these Christian people say that pre-existed in the Garden of Eden with Adam and then was in the ark, I have to say, that's foolish to imagine like that. Because God's not going to put anything in the Garden of our Eden that's going to be absolutely a physical giant in relationship to the man that he's going to put here. So we can see this now then. We are coming at the closing of the 5th day, which now is this. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. So these are all on the 5th day. And the evening and the morning were the 5th day, so we passed 5,000 years. Waters are flowing, birds are to be flying, but there's nothing alive yet there. That's what the end picture is supposed to be. Now we come to the 6th day, and this too is going to be a period of 1,000 years. And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creatures. Notice now, he speaks of the animal kingdom first. He's not talking about fowl life. No, he's not talking about marine life. He's talking about animal life. And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creatures. After his kind, cattle and creeping thing and beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. He just said it. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth. I have to say, coming right on down to the bugs and the little worms. They're all a part of his creation. And God saw that it was good. And God said, now that he's got the animal life spoken into existence. We are the last thing in the calendar. Notice the relationship. And God said, let us make man in our image. Now, if I can just stop long enough, brothers and sisters, and give you a little bit of how I feel about that thing they call it prehistoric man. There was creatures that looked like physically formed, had a head. Some of them were bow-legged, some walked knock-kneed, some were hunchbacked, and some their chin shot out, and some their front teeth overlapped the lower teeth. Ugly-looking creatures. Out in Illinois, Springfield, Illinois. They got a big museum there. And this is where I first saw it in a wax demonstration. My children was all small. We was coming through there, and here it showed, brothers and sisters, these two waxed cavemen. They had been out getting their morning breakfast. And guess what they had between the two of them? Each one was carrying a great big club. And they had between them another character just like they were. And they were dragging him. And then when you come to the next scene, it's all wax. Here was some long-haired cave women. They had a big fire going, and they're looking in the distance, and they seen their husband coming with breakfast. And I looked at that. I thought to myself, what a picture and a half. And we're supposed to be descendants of that. Well, about that time, brothers and sisters, we get home, and they put a little article in the Cordon Democrat about what happened down here in the Ohio River, right above Markport. They opened up a gravel pit, and they was hauling gravel out of there day and weekends. All of a sudden, one day, the man that was operating this great big crane with this bucket, he lets her down in there, and he's pulling up a great big bucket of gravel to turn around and drop it into a big truck. When he dropped it, he noticed some chunks. Big chunks fell in there. It startled him because the gravel, normally it wasn't going into the truck like that. So he stops, and they go take a look. And as they dig around in all this gravel up here, these chunks, they were parts of bones. And as they seen that they were part of bones, here they call Purdue, here they come the students and the scientists and the archaeologists. Oh, they begin to dig and dig. And you know what they found? They found parts of a tusk and the bones of a giant mastodon elephant. Now, brothers and sisters, nowhere in the history of North America, as we relate ourselves to the history of it, has it ever had elephants living. That has to go back to an era of time, brothers and sisters, when every continent was interconnected by, we will say, an isthmus of land connected. And the climate was perfect. You don't have elements living in sub-zero climates. They only grow, we will say, in tropical type climates. But was parts of a mastodon elephant. They wrote quite an article about it. When I thought back about what I saw in Springfield, Illinois, up to that time, brothers and sisters, I was just like all others. I believe that these creative days were just days of 24 hours. Well, this got my mind to boozing. I said, somewhere there's got to be an explanation to this. Well, I remember, brothers and sisters, just along about that time, Brother Branham made a statement. When a man had criticized him for believing them creative days was like days of 24 hours. He said, that has nothing to do with it. He said, I believe it says in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, period. But he said, I believe every seed was waiting, was already there. And when light came and things began to warm up, life began to spring up. And I said, now then, that begins to make sense. I can begin to piece it all together. But now let us get back here. And God said, let us make man. We're in the closing parts of that 6th day. And he said to the angelic beings, and at that time, brothers and sisters, he's already spoke the animal kingdoms. He has spoke their spirits, what they will be, and there's laws that govern the reproduction of every one of them, right down to the fish and worm. Don't put angels off somewhere in a laboratory playing. They're just as busy at work as you and I in the natural have been. They've got an important role to play. God's not in this by himself. He shares himself with that of something else that he's created to help him and assist him. So when we see here then that God says, let us make man in our image and after our likeness. He's not talking about a physical form. He's talking about the beginning of the being. And God is the only source of life there is in this universe. So since he's life, God has to take up himself and separate that spirit of life from himself. When he did, he has in it the qualities of feminine and masculine all in the spirit makeup. Now then, and man is a spirit being after the image and likeness of God. God's got an intelligence, so did he make man with an intelligence. And this man here, he's not like the old prehistoric creature. We will just say he was probably the highest form of animal life. That's certainly like the serpent in our era of time. But let's take a good look at this man that he creates. He's created this man, male and female. And in the 28th verse, and God blessed them. And God said unto them, be fruitful. When he says this, who does this go to? It goes into their intellect. Their intellect, brothers and sisters, is not what we call the brain. The brain is that substance that's in this head. But it's in the intellect of that spirit being they are. He says, and multiply. And when it says this, long about the same time, that's when this word stuck out at me. And replenish. Boy, when that hit me, I said, that answers it all. God's word is so simply put together, and men have looked over it. They become blinded to it. And here's one word to our ancestral Adam. And I could see him as the spirit form that he was. And God speaks into his intellect. Multiply. That means add to. And replenish. Replenish means again, fill it up. Boy, I tell you, that made something to another real. Now I can see the past. The planet Earth had been filled with life before. Something happened that caused God to bring it all to an end by some catastrophic judgment, and God did bring it to an end. How long it stayed froze up like that, we don't have to know. Let them guess. Let them try to measure time. Let them measure, people say, the rocks. They'll probably be still measuring them in the millennium too, if God let them survive that long. But the point is, and replenish. I have to say, brothers and sisters, if you and I could have lived in the days when Adam was put in the Garden of Eden, and if that word replenish could have been brought before you, I believe if you'd have asked Adam, what does that word mean? He could explain exactly, verbally, just exactly what it means. He no doubt would have told you, brothers and sisters, well, it means this planet Earth, he wants it filled up again, because that's what it meant. And subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. So man was made in the image of God to be a God creature, to have authority, and for everything to be under submission to him. And we have to realize, brothers and sisters, and know, even though sin did happen later, when man was put here on the planet, which brought about, brothers and sisters, a broken relationship between God and Satan taking over certain eras, Still man today is proved scientifically, he still has the master over everything. He's been known to outsmart every animal, everything that there is alive. And when I think, brothers and sisters, that he's made these rockets and things to go to the moon and such like, what a creature. What an intelligence. I don't say, brothers and sisters, the fact that he's got his play toys on Mars crawling around, I don't say that he's really doing God a service. I have to believe he's trying to use all this scientific technology, trying to outsmart God. And there's where he's going to wind up in the loser. But the fact, brothers and sisters, that man has been known from time to now. He has brought under subjection every animal. No matter how big, he subdued it and caught it. So when we see here, and God said, behold, I have given you. Now here's what he says. This has happened to be in the intellect. Behold, I have given every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed to you, it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. 6 days God worked. Now let's see what happens. Chapter 2 tells us, thus the heavens, that's the first thing God dealt with, separating the waters from the heavens. Thus the heavens and the earth, because when he began to gather the waters into certain areas, then that which is called the earth, the dry land, began to appear. Were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, not a day of 24 hours, but a day of, we will say, time, God ended his work, which he had made, and rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. That brings us, brothers and sisters, to another 1,000 years. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. Now here's the analysis of it all. Verse 4. These are the generations of the heavens. And the word generations there, brothers and sisters, has nothing to do with days of 24 hours. It means lifespan. Lifespan. Now we know, brothers and sisters, when we do see Adam put on earth, Adam was made to live forever. That's the potential side. He was made to live forever. God made a garden. So now look at my illustration. Here are the 6 days he worked. But Genesis 2 and second verse and third verse is the history of all of this. And it says, thus are the generations. Generations at that time is a relationship to a man's allotted lifespan. We do know this, brothers and sisters, that when we read again, when God then seen that there was not a man to till the earth, that's why there was no grass growing here, nor here, nor here. Because it says it had not even rained yet. But for a long time, brothers and sisters, it didn't rain until the flood came. The earth was watered by a mist. Now that, brothers and sisters, is a true scientific. We've all seen what mist can become. It's taken the spring of the year. How beautiful it is. The sun can set up at evening. It's been warm through the daytime. But at night, the temperatures drop just enough. And the earth, it sweats. What it is, it's that vaporized water that's there in the air. You can't see it. But with just that change in temperature, brothers and sisters, step outside the next morning, and that grass is just dripping wet with, you call it dew. And brothers and sisters, if you can look at what we're talking about in the right light, there would have never been such a thing as floods, because God was slowly in the process coming out of this, through this, to start here. He was in the process, brothers and sisters, establishing a perfect environment on this earth. All the glaciers haven't melted yet, but I have to say, brothers and sisters, had sin not had wrecked the whole thing and man started on the downward course, there would have never been a flood occur here 1,640 some years later, because it had never rained. The earth had, we will say, a perfect climate. It sweats at night. It sweats enough that gives the plant life the necessary water element to breathe and eat, to live on. So my point, brothers and sisters, is God is in the process of still melting the glacier, because as he starts the life cycle here again, by the time we'd come through here, and I have to say, by the time we'd come into about here, there wouldn't even been a glacier left on this planet. And if there would not have been a glacier left on this planet, then I have to say, why in the world are these signs getting all up in the air about the greenhouse effect? When we read in Revelations 21 and 22, that's where we're all heading. I hope to goodness you are. I am. And he saw no more seas, no more giant oceans. Because it lets me know, brothers and sisters, through this millennium era right here, 1,000 years, God has a way of pulling that masses of water out of the waters of the oceans and the seas, so that by the time 1,000 years have transpired, he's got the planet Earth right back where he wants it for a perfect eternal era to never end. So, brothers and sisters, I realize we're just about to the end of my hour here, but I want to read this again. These are the generations, and let me say this. These are the centuries of time that God was occupied in separating the waters, relocating the planet, bringing it back in relationship to the sun, designing the future the way he has, so that by a certain time the planet Earth would then be in proper temperament, environmental condition for life to begin to spring forth. We know this, brothers and sisters. Adam was not put on the earth immediately then. And he was not on the earth when God had his Sabbath. Because when you pick up over here, brothers and sisters, here's where it says, and there was not a man to till the earth. God is, after he has rested, now he takes a look at the earth, just like he's starting over again. But look in the numerical equality, what is it? That's the 8th day. 7 here. There's the 8th day. And that's why it's typed, brothers and sisters, in the law. That's why in Leviticus, the 3rd chapter, God demanded the Jews to work 6 days on the Sabbath rest. But when you read in that 23rd chapter, brothers and sisters, Christ was crucified in the Jewish Passover season. But keep in mind, he did not raise on the Sabbath. He raised on the first day of the week, which is the 8th day. This sets in motion a perfect type. He's the beginning of the new creation of God. That's why, brothers and sisters, the earth is going through this cycle again. And as she goes through the millennium, he sets and rules and reigns for 1,000 years, subduing every enemy. And at the end, he brings out of hell every evil spirit, so that clears the heart of the earth. He calls out of the crust of the earth and out of the sea every dead body of every spirit being that has never been born again or changed to have eternal life. He calls them out in the second resurrection, and they're judged before the great white throne judgment, brothers and sisters. That ends the earth's era of sin, of struggle, of labor, of toil and tears. Now the earth is beautified. Now there is an element of people. They're glorified. They're immortalized. Now they're ready to go into the 8th day. That's eternity without an end. worlds, ages, with no ending. So now, we'll call it that an end to this morning. Now, I don't want